My name is Ethan Hartwood, and for as long as I can remember, I've felt like a monster. My condition has always been a kind of family secret, one which I wasn't aware of until after an incident when I was 18 that I'd rather not get into. That was when, in the doctor's office, that my mother told me that she and my father had always expected that I was on the spectrum, which I don't have a problem with, but sure was a startle. To me, it explains the isolation of my formative years, and almost explains this wolf man being chased by the village mob kind of feeling that I've always had. The only thing is that I do not have enough hair on my chest to be the wolf man. I guess you could call my passion for zoology a special interest. It's what led me to being an ethologist. A worried bison's eye behind a fence unlocked a lost catharsis in me that I hadn't known was there. I was able to translate the feelings of animals, wild and domestic, better than I could people. After college, I got in pretty nicely with the New Hampshire Fish and Game Department, and became a contact of park rangers, state troopers, and authorities of the sort. I've helped relocate black bear cubs after some nutjob in Tamworth shot their mother. I've helped conservation efforts. I have a running catalog of the moose populace in Conway and Ossipee, though their species almost as reclusive as me. I've been in and out of the many wildlife sanctuaries not just in New Hampshire, but in most of New England too. And I did all of this while drafting a census of the loon population on my own time. But the strangest thing I ever had to do was investigate Lacey Portney's bears. I've dealt with coyotes, black bears, horny moose, bold eagles caught in trash bags with their wings flapping violently within the black polyethylene like a captured angel. And I've dealt with state troopers with chests and shoulders as big as gorillas and faces so stern that it made me feel like I had committed a dozen felonies. But nothing compares to Lacey Portney. She saw the frightened animal within me, and I think she saw me more as a bear than a man. Yes, that's exactly what it was. And I have no one else to tell this to. You'll understand why soon if you humor me and continue to listen. I had bear spray holstered on my belt the day I knocked on the paradoxical contemporary log cabin of Lacey Portney. I call it paradoxical because it was a mix between a log cabin home and contemporary home, the kind of contemporary homes on the street which Sharon Tate was murdered on. The rustic brown clashed with the white, but ultimately the logs came into place like bowing slaves to the white columns and glass paneled walls. It was like a spaceship in disguise as a cabin home. It was surrounded by a well that looked like it hadn't been used in a century, tall pines with carpets of orange pine needles at their bases, and splotches of emerald lawn where the trees did not infringe. The door opened. "Lacey Portney," I said in my best "I'm human, no, really, I'm human" voice. "This is your house, correct?" But then my faculties, which I spent so long sharpening, were stupefied, and I might as well have been caught mid-transformation. She had an expectant smile, which I couldn't discern if it was jubilant, childish, or mischievous. She had brown eyes and a kind of vague makeup on that made you uncertain of whether or not makeup had actually been applied, making her face simply shiny and natural, but you couldn't trust the naturalness. She was maybe 5'2" and was in a purple short skirt, emphasis on the short. Tassels, pale pink tassels, hung from the brassiere part of the top of the skirt. Her hair was dark brown and bobbed. The color in the disconnect between her brown eyes and pink skirt was fascinating immediately. Releasing from her smile came the smell of that Green Act mouthwash. Despite the smell, her teeth were not pearly actress white, which gave the rest of her appearance a greater human quality. And somehow it reminded me even more that this wasn't a woman in a skimpy skirt, but just another human being. "Hello?" she said with the marvel of a sultrily trained voice. My own voice came out very rehearsed, but friendly so. Hello, Miss Portney. My name is Ethan Hartwood. I'm the ethologist here to see if you're up to regulation with keeping wild animals for exhibit purposes." Exhibit purposes. That was exactly why they were sending me before sending in 24 state troopers with 12 gauges. In most states, you can only own a wild animal for exhibit purposes, such as for a zoo or sanctuary. Apparently, Lacey Portney threw down the exhibit card when law enforcement smelt bear on her, and that had really muddied up their process in going in themselves to get the bears, i.e., me. She peeked through the doorway to see if anyone had come with me, and her secretive smile returned when she saw that I'd come alone. I took out my little notebook and pen as if to thwart this, but I was bested again by the way she breathed me in, my soul getting raptured by that Green Act mouthwash breath. "Why don't you just come in, Ethan? It'll make this easier." I did so. The first floor consisted of the truce between a living room and a kitchen. The kitchen was of the white space station variety, while the living room was a cozy piece of the frontier. There was a glass wall in the living room that looked into the wilderness. The couches in the living room exuded comfort, the kind of comfort promised at the end of adventures. And the living room was so brave for existing in adjacence with the futuristic kitchen. "You brought bear spray," she noted, entering the kitchen. "You won't need it." She flashed a smile. "They listen to me." "They?" "My bears." "Your bears?" I queried. "Yes, my bears, Ethan," she said as if it would be silly to question the validity of them being hers. There wasn't something motherly in the way she said, "my bears," but more sovereign, like a queen saying, "my subjects." "Come into the kitchen, Ethan. Pick the living room or the kitchen. Neither room will pick you if you just stand there." I was so cautious that I almost limped instead of walked when I entered the kitchen. "Tea or coffee, Ethan?" Do you have lemonade?" She did a half twirl to the fridge and caught herself on the handle. "Pink all right?" I cringed. "Yes." She got out a pitch full of liquid that matched her skimpy outfit and poured out 2 glasses. They were glasses more fitting for scotch than lemonade. "I guess pink is your favorite color." "It is," she cooed, taking steps across the kitchen as if it was a stage at a burlesque show. She made us clink glasses. Her eyes remained expectant on me while she took her drink. I almost spat out the drink. "I drove here." But the drink had already dropped into my belly. "Leaving so soon?" "Apparently not. What'd you put in here?" "Pink Whitney." I must have made a weird face because her smile, that I had been so uncertain before, curled into the certainty of amusement. "It's pink lemonade vodka. Did you know that?" I wiped my mouth. "Ah, that's great." "Don't you like it?" A thought struck me. What if she was going to poison me and feed me to her bears? I put my glass of pink lemonade on the granite countertop of an island and said, "All right, Miss Portney, Why don't you tell me what inspired you to get all these bears? How many bears do you have?
5 little rascals.
5? In your house?
My bedroom. I let them play around out back, of course. That's where they make their messes. They're just dogs, you know.
I tried shaking my head to bat away the absurdity, but it was useless, because it came out of my voice a little bit. Tell me, what inspired this decision, though?
Ethan.
She put her glass down next to mine after a sip.
Do you remember that viral TikTok trend? Man or the bear?
Refresh my memory.
I think it was this spring. Yeah, this spring, where everyone on social media was up in arms about this debate on whether a woman would feel safer in the woods with a bear or with a man. Well, I picked the bear.
So this is a political statement.
She shrugged one shoulder. It's a spiritual one.
I have to say, I understand why some women would pick the bear, but most women, she snapped, and the snapping made her sultry voice shaky like a rope bridge over a canyon. Yes, Miss Portney, I understand. But do you know the damage that bears can actually inflict? They wouldn't like for me to tell you this, but I answered a call just last year to a case where a grandmother was eaten in her own home by a black bear that happened into it. I started rambling. People like to think black bears are the cuddly kind, and her voice made me stop. Are you aware of the damage that a man can inflict? I didn't answer more out of respect than anything, because her eyes were alive with stubborn belief. At this moment, I saw the face of the woman who was smart enough to use the exhibit excuse on the wildlife authorities. And for your information, Ethan, my bears are the cuddly kind. Well, what species of bear are they? Would you like to meet them? Hesitation came over me, and it made me want to drink my drink despite how foul it tasted. If lemonade had been made inside a lab with antifreeze and a 3D printed lemon instead of made by kids on a summer day, that was how lemonade with Pink Whitney tasted. Why did she seem amused by my hesitation? My disgust for the poison in our glasses? She looked as though she was already getting what she wanted. Asking me to carry her drink for her, she led me upstairs. We walked down a rustic hallway that felt more like the tunnel of an old mine than a hallway, and stopped in the doorway of her bedroom. I felt more lavish than I should have with the 2 glasses in my hand. Her perfume and faintest pickle smell of perspiration wafted onto me when she came in front of me to open up the baby-proof gate that was in the doorway. And then I saw them. "Hi, babies," she whined as she entered the bedroom, which was in the log home style and not the contemporary style. There was a pink rug, pink satin curtains opaque enough to let the sunlight in, and a great bed with pink covers and pink pillows that let their yellow bellies be seen on the side of the cases. The blonde cub giddied up to her first. His paws were too big for his little, fluffy body, and he resembled a giant baby chicken more than a bear. "Hi, Malfoy," she cooed to this blonde bear cub. He sat on his ass, almost toppled over, and started rubbing his back against her bare leg. The smell of Lacey left me, and the smell of something similar to the smell inside of a Petco store greeted me. "Where are your friends?" she asked the bear before turning to me. "Malfoy's a rescue from Alaska." I had already surmised this after seeing his abnormally blonde pelt. Something tugged the blanket of the bed on the other side of it. "Lucy," she scolded and hurried into the room. She's always pulling things down." She bent down and made the groan of strength as she picked up a black bear cub that squirmed in her arms. 2 polar bear cubs chased each other on the pink rug. She told me that their names were Olaf and Elsa while she cradled Lucy in her arms. "Where's the 5th one?" I questioned.
She looked around the room and said, "That's a good question." "So they're all cubs?" "They are, and they have milk, berries, and fish every day. Did you know that?" "No," I heard myself say in a meek reply as Malfoy rubbed himself on Lacey's naked legs again. Lucy started using an anteater-sized tongue to lick Lacey's cheek, and I have to say the smile Lacey made unhardened my heart. I felt the transformation reverse. "Dan!" she called in a dinner bell voice. "Oh, little Dan!" "Oh, he got out again." "Out?" "Relax, Ethan. He's probably just looking out the window in the study again." "Could you go get him for me?" "Oh, put our glasses on my nightstand. Thank you, honey." I did so, closed the baby gate and started searching for the study. It was a room in the contemporary style with a desktop computer, printer, and bookshelf full of colorful romance titles. Dan, the grizzly bear cub, was not a cub. I yelped and shut the door. What? You didn't tell me?" I panted after hurrying back into the bedroom. "Oh, nonsense. He's a growing boy," she said, still cradling Lucy and still accepting Malfoy's rubs on her legs. "Miss Portney, are you aware that you have an adult grizzly bear inside your home?" "I am. And he is on drugs, so it's okay." "It's okay." "Perfectly fine. I even give him some lemonade sometimes, although he prefers whiskey. Luckily, I can afford it. A bear that prefers whiskey. It had to be the most New Hampshire thing I'd heard in my life. "Afford it," I muttered, catching my breath. Then I looked at the rambunctious polar bear cubs, Malfoy at her legs and Lucy in her arms. She could afford their diet, afford however the hell she even purchased them, afford drugs and booze for Dan, and afford this eccentric house. And it all seemed perfectly normal to her. How can you afford all this?" She rolled her eyes and snickered. Lucy was content now that she was being bounced in the woman's arms. "I was on OnlyFans, but I'm retired now." Why did this surprise me as much as finding a full-grown grizzly in the study? For some reason, as if to distract myself, I started wondering about the quantity of alcohol it took Lacey to get Dan drunk. His size and weight probably made his tolerance titanic. I made millions in the pandemic, and my girlie from high school, who went to school for banking and money or whatever they do, helped me invest some of it. "Your investments yielded you this house already?" Her smile was faint and forgiving and seemed impossible to belong to a woman who had been an OnlyFans model. "Millions," she cooed. "Well, I'm not one to judge, but Miss Portney, we do have to do something about these bears." "Oh, of course you judge. And you probably have a Madonna whore complex like the others." "A what?" I heard myself ask. I looked around the bedroom, probably cringing. "Have your drink, Ethan. You look like you could use it." "I gotta get going, Miss Portney. I'm sorry, but..." Malfoy ran over to me and started sniffing my pants. "It's okay," she said. "You can pat him." Timidly, I reached down and smoothed my hand down his head. It was soft, very soft. I asked for water. I wanted water so that it could undo the single gulp of lemonade that I had had. She told me to stay in the bedroom to watch the bears while she did so, and she came back with a glass of water. I should have smelled it first, but, again, I had already taken a gulp before I knew what it was. What is this?" "Vodka." I felt my eyebrows shoot up. Unfortunately, I think the gulp I took was equivalent to a shot. I wasn't a shot kind of guy. I never drank except for the rare family gathering. In fact, that incident when I was 18 was alcohol-related. "What are you doing? Why are you doing this?" "Because," she said, her voice falling like a feather back into its sultry rain. There's something different about you, Ethan Hartwood.
Why did her voice pick at my heart like it was an instrument then?
Stay a little longer. Sober up the way a stickler for the rules would. Get to know my bears and know that they are safe with me.
It's more so about your safety, I admitted. They can't be pets.
But I picked the bear,
she said wonderfully. I went outside and got out my phone, but as the smell of the forest, the smell of dehydrated wood, rich soil like mulch in a garden, and the sound of cicadas in the trees, all of it stopped me from calling the authority who had contacted me about Lacey Portney. She hadn't seduced me. She hadn't drugged me. She said that there was something different about me. Was there? I stood there by my car in a moment of conflict between my phone and the woods. My thumb was right over the contact, right there, but I didn't press it, and went back inside. Phone calls make me nervous anyway.
So, what did your boss say?
She said when I entered and returned upstairs to the bedroom. They, didn't answer. I shrugged.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's all good. Now, can I have something that you haven't laced with alcohol? There's water bottles in the fridge.
Help yourself.
Make yourself at home. I was in the kitchen, circling the open water bottle beneath my nose when she came down with Malfoy trampling along behind her. He had traversed the stairs impressively so, given his size and not yet adjusted limbs. So this whole thing, it's really just about the bear or man in the woods argument? I asked. She shrugged with the grace someone would use to get a coat to shimmy off their shoulders.
It's not so much about proving a point,
but being the point. This was easy to understand upon seeing the hunger for splendor that made her brown eyes shine. And below all this vanity, sultriness, all this intense defense of opinion, there was an almost temporal power to her. She looked at me and I felt seen in a way I had never been.
What kind of monster are you?
She asked me after a careful consideration on her part. It took me aback, with the question making me wish I had drank the rest of my pink lemonade after all. I forced myself to remember its sour taste while I stammered to say, "Huh? What do you mean?"
You have the same look in your eyes when Dan looks out the window into the forest,
she said, going on to elaborate with a bashfulness for her own theory.
All men are some kind of monster. Being a man is being a monster. But you seem almost hesitant to accept being one. Are you one?
Yes, I'm a man. She laughed at my frankness. Her laughter settled down as smoothly as a plane coming in for landing.
I didn't mean it like that.
I mean, are you like them? The rest of them? I didn't know how to answer her. I wasn't even sure if I understood the question. How crazy was she? Would a somewhat more normal person understand her? What is it about me that makes you think I'm not normal? I asked.
Because you're trying too hard to act normal.
I am? Again, she was amused by my frank surprise.
Will you come watch my favorite movie with me?
Miss Portney, I put up a hand, stirring all sense of normalcy within me. I can't stay for a movie. I shouldn't have even come back in.
Why did you come back in, Ethan?
I started trying to think of an answer, but it was too late. I knew, she knew that whatever I would say would be a lie. So I stood there with my hand out like a crossing guard and my mouth open in stage fright.
Do what you have to do, Ethan. But rest assured my bears are safe. Call who you need. Come back here if your conscience can't handle it.
Malfoy was rubbing up against her bare legs.
I guess I'll just watch the movie Pearl alone.
You have your bears, Miss Portney, I said and moseyed over to the front door. Expect a call or visit from Fish and Game, or a couple of stadies. Why did I tell the people I was working for that Lacey Portney had 5 juvenile bears, and that she released them into the wild after I talked her down? I don't know. She was a lunar deity, and I was the Wolfman after all. Maybe I wasn't forthcoming with the truth because of the lack of sense of danger inside her house. Sure, the prospect of Dan's presence made me uneasy, but something within me just forbade me from being honest. Lying to the people that I lied to was not the easiest thing. I think, for whatever reason, I felt that if I told them the truth, then they would somehow find out that I was possibly different from them. What would that matter? No. All of this was because Lacey Portney's eyes domesticated the part of me too afraid to be a man. She made me feel seen. Well, my conscience got the better of me, and I ended up at her house again a couple of days after writing a false report for those I was working for.
Ethan,
she said when she opened up the door. This time she was wearing a white t-shirt that said, I Heart New York. She was wearing very short shorts too that were purple.
What are you doing here?
I lied for you, I burst in. She closed the door after me. I turned around, caught between the living room and kitchen. Why did I lie for you? She got real serious, although her sultry voice remained present.
Because I picked the bear, and you, for whatever reason, relate to the bear more than the man.
Am I like the bear? Was she about to smile?
You're something in between.
I started pacing between the granite island and the fridge. She approached me, reaching out.
You're stressed.
She touched my face. I stopped. Why did she touch my face?
Come with me. I know what you need, man,
she said in a voice similar to that of the most diligent of nurses. And though she only had her open hand on my cheek and wasn't grabbing me, I was leashed to her. She took backward steps and ferried me towards the staircase, me trailing in obedience with the magnets in my cheek and in her palm. How elegantly her movement quieted my distress. Up the stairs, through the hallway and into her bedroom where the 4 cubs were cuddled up on the rug. She crawled backwards onto the bed, hand still connected to my cheek. And she guided me onto it with her, so slowly and carefully that the mattress didn't react to our weight. Then came her other hand, and she guided me in a relaxing descent to where my head landed in the lap of the legs that the blonde bear cub had so worshipped. She started petting my hair as the rest of me fell into obedient stillness, before obedient stillness became permissible relaxation. Her legs were soft, but firm, and very forgiving and welcoming on my face. What was this? The question was raked away with every stroke her nails made in my hair. I felt her eyes on the top of my head. She was holding me. My eyes lay half open at the start of the surface of her thigh. It was the floor of a brilliant temple, maybe how the floors of ancient Greece used to appear. A smooth beige with every pore just adding to the brilliance of her legs. And they were safe to lay on. Her lap was safe to lay in. Of all the animal sanctuaries I'd ever inspected, worked in, and gone to access animal behavior in, I had finally found my sanctuary. That was how I laid there. But how did she hold me? She held me the way she would have held a beast. One of her bears had they grown, a coyote, a tired mountain lion. She held me with so much acceptance. I woke up at sunset with the orange light throwing itself into the bedroom. "Hello," she said, in response to the gentlest movements of my head. I fell asleep. "You did." She started stroking my hair again to carefully retrieve my spirit out of sleep. "And now it's sunset." "I see," I said, and we laid there into the night. And from that night forward, our bond was almost instant. She that holds the mirror up to man to unmask his beasthood domesticates him. I think that's what Lacey did to me with the simplest touch of her hand. Forgiving touch, accepting touch. Except it wasn't my beasthood that she unmasked and accepted. Just my truest self. The part of me I had no control over. The thing that made me different in such a subtle way that it sometimes required people to take a closer look to see it. That thing which gave me that wolfman running from the village mob kind of feeling is what Lacey Portney unlocked. And the wolfman accidentally stumbled into the crazy bear lady in the woods. I think this is where I learned my most important lesson about the man versus bear argument. Maybe the women who picked the bear were more likely to pick the wolfmen of the world. Those who had modern lycanthropy. The socially awkward, the weird, the diagnosed and undiagnosed, the not as normal. And when I let myself transform in her lap every day, I realized that I wasn't much different at all. I was just quiet. The only difference was that my brain was open while she scratched my scalp and stroked my hair, as if she was petting a bear to sleep. I wasn't afraid with her, despite Dan usually being drunk off of whiskey in the other room. What I didn't know was how loose Lacey was with trash. All the things she fed her cubs and Dan attracted the wild black bears in the woods. And she would tell me stories about how she caught a bear rummaging through her trash bin outside last night. I drove her to the dump after she told me this, and I showed her the ropes. "It's the fish bones and excess berries that attract them," I remember telling her on the drive back to her house. We bottle-fed her bear cubs goat milk, and for a time it was almost no different than one of the many sanctuaries I'd worked at. Except this was my sanctuary too. My sanctuary was cradling Malfoy and holding the baby bottle to his snout, and smiling as she did so. I cleaned up when Elsa peed in the kitchen, and we watched the bear cubs play around outside, chasing dragonflies and wrestling with one another while Dan watched from inside the house. I remember watching Lacey's smile become a marina of giggles and laughter, while she swiveled in place to keep up with the speed of the cubs. And I remember the way her laughter shook her chest and freed her of her past profession and wealth, and made her incredibly human. I felt incredibly human too, as the babies of American wildlife galloped at our feet. I began feeling less like an ethologist and more like a man dating a single mother with 4 kids. The disgraced and estranged father in the study. Oh, and the talks she gave. Her voice seemed to have traded in its sultry nature for a soothing one. She gave me affirmations. She analyzed me like no one ever had before, and she was good at it. Yes, our embraces in the bedroom were often accompanied by these analytical monologues and affirmations. But in the safety of realizing myself with her help, I had forgotten about the danger of bears. We developed a miraculous intimacy. there were moments when we would be in the kitchen and she would smile at me like she was proud of me. I think she was proud of me for simply existing. She looked at me like I was her favorite bear. And because I was a bear to her, she was a kind of goddess to me. She made me play the way she let her cubs play. We went out to dinner one night all the way in Meredith, New Hampshire, in a restaurant on a lake where she told the waitress that it was our 10th anniversary. She was a good liar. A very good liar. Even I believed the background story of how we met she gave to the waitress. I went to pick up the check that night, but she stopped me, her fortune blipping in and out of existence as she got out her debit card. We had gotten home late because Lacey insisted we take a selfie in front of a moose statue that had been carved from wood. In that picture, the sunset is dispersing into an orange final breath above the wilderness beyond Conway, and in that picture she is smiling. It's a genuine smile, radiant with something more than happiness. And of course I'm standing next to her, awkward as can be. But I assure you that I was happy too. But when we got back to her house, sometime after 9, we found that Dan, the grizzly bear, was missing. Being her beast, it was my obligation to drive her around the back roads in search of the bear. The headlights illuminated the stretch of road with a parallel border of trees consuming the light while we cruised at a creeping 15 miles per hour.
"Oh, poor thing," Lacey crooned. "He must be so scared."
Thankfully, it was dark enough for her not to see the face I made. I was pretty sure that Dan the grizzly bear wasn't going to be scared wherever he went, but I was keeping my mouth shut.
"You're an ecologist, Ethan. Can you find him?"
Ethologist. My correction had no effect on her. She was looking out the windows into the darkness that the forest harbored. Her hand fell on my thigh like an injured bird.
"What if he meets a mean bear?"
I almost laughed. I don't think he will. The road curled and I followed the curvature, evading the sound of rushing water from somewhere down below that reminded us that we were in New Hampshire. Black bears are the only bear species in New Hampshire. Dan will scare them off. Don't you worry.
"He could be having withdrawals."
Withdrawals?
Jameson withdrawals. It's his favorite whiskey.
I think it was because I'm too deadpan, and because I can't really emphasize sarcasm, but she believed me when I said, "Maybe he's at a bar somewhere."
"He could smell the booze,"
she shouted, almost making me flip the car over into whatever stream was down below. Her phone screen illuminated her face, and I think I saw her identity waver, flash. And for the briefest of moments, I saw a cam girl checking her revenue and subscriber count, but she was just searching for local bars.
"Ah,"
she groaned.
"I have no signal."
"Use my phone." She dug it out of my pocket. She already knew my passcode then.
"Ah, don't they give ethnologists better phone reception?"
"Sometimes they give me a radio," I said proudly.
"Okay, if I remember right, if we get onto Route 25 and keep going, then we should end up in Tamworth. And I know there's this new bar they've been waiting to open up for months now. Maybe that's why he got out. Maybe he wants to try the new bar. Oh, they aren't going to treat him nice when they sees a bear. All the bikermen and all the New Hampshire people."
I waited before asking, "You really think he's gotten that far?"
"I know my Dan. He'd do anything for Jameson." "Did I run out?" "Ethan, we have to stop by the liquor store on the way home."
"I think most might be closed by then."
"But the Indians never close."
I was nodding only because I didn't really know how to wrangle her. I've managed to deal with all kinds of animals in all kinds of moods, but a panicked Lacey Portney was a whole other thing. She had the vitality of a single mother whose kids disappeared while playing at the park. To me, the obvious answer was that Dan was somewhere in the woods, but she was convinced that he was pub crawling.
"Do you have cigarettes in your car?"
I've never smoked, I said. Still, she started digging through the glove box. Lacey, I said. Look, Dan is going to be fine wherever he is. He's in bear heaven now, New Hampshire. Do you know how chill he's going to be? He's an alcoholic, she squealed. Her face was scrunching up, cheeks wringing out tears. Stop the car. Stop the car. I did so, pulling over on Route 25 that was cut into an astronomically long stretch of wilderness, and she leaned over to cry in my arms. What I did was replicate her fashion of holding me, except I think my masculinity bled into the comforting embrace. I rubbed her shoulder gently and shushed her because I thought it was right to do so. And eventually, we ebbed into the nature of a couple. We'll find him, I said. He's all right. She just stamped my chest with sobs that sounded similar to hiccups. Hey, just think. Malfoy, Lucy, Elsa, and Olaf are probably wondering where you are. She nodded in my chest. Why don't we head back and see them and keep looking tomorrow? Again, she nodded in my chest, and with her still curled over into the driver's seat, I did a U-turn on Route 25 and headed back in the direction of her house. She was morose the next morning while we had our coffee together. With expectation, she asked me if there was anything I could do. It was such a sour feeling saying no to her. She developed an attitude that day. We had a tussle, if you could call it that. It was basically me absorbing remark after remark. You're an ethnologist. You're supposed to know what to do, my bear. My hands are tied, I shrugged. They don't know I let you keep your bears. If they find out, then I'll be blacklisted. I did not want to be blacklisted. I did not want to have to move to regions like California or New Mexico, where conservation-happy liberal politicians let black bears invade unassuming neighborhoods. Blacklisted, she shrugged with her face. You ever get banned or put on notice by one of the sites you used to model on? Kinda like that, but are you judging me? No, I carefully and quickly said. I took a deep breath and my thinking skills kicked in. Look, we'll buy Jack Daniels and Jameson in bulk today. But Dan is missing. I paused and continued, and we will pour out each bottle around and away from your property. I'll drive us a little ways down the road and we'll start leaving a whiskey trail to here. Her face seemed on the verge of twitching, but didn't because she was thinking. After breakfast and after getting ready and all washed up, we drove out. Driving until we got off Route 25 and onto Route 16, where we cruised from liquor store to liquor store. I don't want to give the impression that New Hampshire has liquor stores the way a band geek has bad acne. No, we just spent the day driving around a lot. Lacey did her mascara while I drove, and the back seat began amassing a questionable amount of cardboard boxes full of Jameson and Jack Daniels. I picked up a couple of those Jack and Coke packs in a gas station for good measure. Lacey bought 3 bottles of Black Label, each costing $50, and then she bought another 3 at the next liquor store. She was so stressed that she cracked open one of the Jack and Cokes on the drive back to her house. I remember looking over her as I drove, and how the big black can looked in her hand as if her stress had shrunk her. We didn't go directly to her house. What we did was stop and park on the side of the road, walk into the woods a little with a couple of bottles of whiskey, unscrewed the caps and flimsily whipped the whiskey out of the bottles by shaking the bottle above the carpet of pine needles. It looked as if we were dousing gasoline on the forest floor with arsonistic intentions. We did this all in a hurry, scampering back into the car, driving further down the way and getting out to do the same thing. And when we got back to her house, we kept going down the road and repeated that so there were 2 whiskey trails in the woods leading to her house. I took a deep breath when we entered her house as if to rid myself of the smell of whiskey. I was pretty sure I got some on my shoes. Did we make a dent in your bank account? I asked her as I hugged her from behind in the kitchen, faint fumes of Coca-Cola on her breath.
Oh, please, she chortled with what little energy she had. Then she became stale in my hug and asked, "Do you think he ran away because of me? Because of you? Because maybe he doesn't like me?" "Lacey, that's a funny thing to say." "I'm serious, Ethan." She twisted around in the hug with her face very serious. "That's nonsense, Lacey." The sound of the bear cubs scratching at the baby gate upstairs revived a glimmer in her eyes. Did they hear her voice? Did they smell her? I'm sure they did, and they wanted to see her badly. So we went upstairs to where Malfoy, Lucy, Elsa, and Olaf cheered her up. Malfoy did his ritual at her legs and rubbed his back up against her shins, while Lucy tore down the pink curtains, which I repaired after Lacey and I laughed about it. That night we sat in her backyard and listened to the silence that the woods were pretending to have. We sat in lawn chairs and held hands. That was the night she asked me, "Ethan, why are you so different?" I told her. I told her all of it. The whole incident that led my mother to telling me she believed I was possibly on the spectrum, and how even that remained unsolved. I told her everything. My voice tiptoed instead of spoke. My own voice seemed to make New Hampshire become darker, reminding the woods of the days when most settlers were down in Mass and not up in New Hampshire where the wilderness was still wonderfully unknown. My voice made the woods become unknown again, and she listened, my only proof of human civilization as we sat out there. I went through all of it. All of it. I went on and on like a man on death row clearing his conscience. And I only did so because I knew she listened. A girl who held me like she had before. Of course she listened. "No," she said when I had finished. "No," she said, her sultry voice reminding itself of its own existence because she was quietly pleased about something. "It's not that. You're just a good man." "I'm a good man?" "Yes," she said, and though it was dark, I knew she smiled. "That's what's different about you, Ethan Hartwood." I don't know if I was flabbergasted, in disbelief, confused, heartbroken, or relieved, but I knew that I was quiet. "I am?" She chuckled at my disbelief. "Yes. Look at all the trouble you went through today. For me." "Well, that's because you see me for the real me. A good man." Then I heard the softest sound of her bobbed hair scratching on her neck as she turned her head. "I know you're relieved that Dan is gone. I bet you thought he was going to eat me." She turned her head back to the woods. "That's what always aggravated me about that internet debate. How all the men in the comments saying that a bear would rip a woman apart. It's okay, I know it's crossed your mind too." I didn't say anything, but sometimes not saying anything at all is more than enough. She knew about the violence of men, and I knew about the violence of bears. She probably could have told me about the most sickening true crime cases, and I probably would have told her about the cases of bear attacks that unnerved me the most. But neither of us went into it. To this day, I still ask myself if OnlyFans models who illegally adopt too many bears are good judges of character. And I always come up with the same answer. Yes. Am I lying to myself? Maybe I still remember the earnestness about her that night. Maybe I can be an unsolved mystery and a good man at the same time. Apparently, it's not that hard. We went inside smelling of bug spray, for we had applied it on our bodies when the sun set, and beneath the fumigation of the bug spray she was there.
We got into our classic position, her domineering and on her back, and me meekly curled into her lap where she pet my hair. What a wonderful mid-transformation moment that was. I can't describe the bliss that fell upon us like some kind of cosmic permission to be free and happy. Our relationship was one consummated strictly cuddling, though I'm not really sure why that was. There was never an inclination of a kiss between us, but there was something incredibly deep, as if we were some kind of ancient trope reincarnate. Lacey never told me that she would go out into the woods while I was off at some wildlife sanctuary or zoo. I only pluralize because I suspect she went out there more than once looking for Dan. I imagine her cupping her hands to her mouth and calling out his name. And even worse, I imagine her making bear grunting calls. I was the one who reported her missing, and it didn't take too long for us to find her. She was alive, but unresponsive, and her body had been stashed in a spot of earth that had been kicked up. She was unrecognizable. One side of her face was in a beautiful sleep, while the other was flayed with part of her cheek missing, teeth exposed in a grisly smile. One arm was in that languid spell of sleep, while the other seemed in scarlet threads. The shoulder of this arm was crushed, with bones spiking out of her skin. I know bears. I know how to track them. I know the anatomy of them, so I knew where to shoot Dan when I found him. I wanted to get to him before anybody else could so that questions wouldn't be raised about the presence of a grizzly bear in New Hampshire. They found the bear carcasses, the stadies giving me details on how the crows and ravens were already breaking through its ribcage. And I started a faux investigation as to what a grizzly bear was doing in New Hampshire. It was only natural I had to blame Lacey. But thankfully for her, the authorities felt so bad for her that no legal punishment was sought. She was airlifted all the way down to Mass General because the hospital here in New Hampshire found her wounds too extensive for them. She has a lot of physical therapy to do with her arm. They almost had to amputate it, but the doctors at Mass General are some of the best in the world, and they fought for her. God bless her plastic surgeon, too. He treated her with so much dignity and class. I know all this because I stayed with her during the long medical purgatory she suffered. This plastic surgeon was the doctor that we saw the most of. What he did was make a series of skin grafts from her thigh and constructed a new cheek for her. But for almost a month her teeth were bare, and the nurses and I had to constantly wipe the saliva that came out from the wound. Her eyes were too similar to a frightened deer in those moments. He tried his best. But Lacey Portney is not the same. Aside from the apricot-shaded scars on the side of her face, there is a sad horror in her eyes. I remember holding her hands while she lay in the hospital bed in Boston, with the bandages over her new cheek. For that was when the look in her eyes first developed. Before there had been some hope that the plastic surgeon could reobtain her old beauty. But now there was a finality. I knew she was changed because she never inquired about the 4 cubs throughout this ordeal. What I never told her is that somewhere in New Hampshire, there is an abandoned house that now belongs to the bears. I never told her that when I went back to collect her belongings that I unlocked all the doors and windows so that the 4 cubs could get out. But ever since then I had the sneaking suspicion that all the bears of New Hampshire have made her abandoned house their capital. I would look at the new horror in her brown eyes and imagine a black bear sniffing the pink curtains of her bedroom. The attack happened in October 2024. It's February 2025 now, and she wears one of those surgical masks we all wore during COVID. She only takes it off when I avert my face, when we get into our position on the bed in my much smaller house. Her legs were not damaged. She shaves them practically every day. Her lower extremities are where her beauty's gone to hide. Yesterday, I got home earlier than expected, and I found Lacey Portney reverting back to her old ways. She was on her knees in front of a camera on a tripod, wearing turquoise lingerie that matched her surgical mask. Her figure was intact and sexually impressive, curved and full, but the scarring on her arm and shoulder was noticeable. Why was the scene the most horrible one of them all? Lacey Portney clinging on to the remnants of her beauty. Does it empower her? Does it repair her vanity? I don't know. I'll never ask her, as long as she still holds me.